Hello and welcome to another episode of Project Sanity. Today is September 15th, 2016. We got a great show for you today. We're going to cover some of the stuff that we covered over this last week. We had some interesting live pop-up shoots go on, and we also did some special stuff for 9/11. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in coming up. We also had Eric Miller, Project Sanity contributor and workhorse all around. Spoke with Lee Camp from TYT. Had lots of great questions to ask, and Lee had lots of great answers, and we'll give you a little preview of that later in the show. Also, we got Bernie at the No DAPL rally in D.C. This is for Solidarity, and he spoke there, so we'll be showing you some of that. We caught Jill Stein while she was out at college, university, or campus. I don't remember one off the top of the head, and I lost my playlist here. But we'll be talking then, and hopefully we'll also be having Jim Cooper joining us from Thurston County in Washington State. He's going to be running, or is currently running for Thurston County Commissioner in District 1. So hopefully he'll be able to join us. And I think that's what we have coming up. Dave, did I miss anything? And then go ahead and I guess we'll also have Eric and Adair joining me as well today. So you guys, did I miss anything that we know we're covering, or anything you guys wanted to mention before we get started today?
Nothing straight off the bat. We do have some comments on the YouTube channel. Pretty quickly here, telling us that Jay Inslee has a bill on the table, an oil bill, and that we should oppose the Vancouver Energy Transfer Project. I haven't looked too much into that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Yeah, we totally oppose or at least I personally totally oppose the TPP, and I'm pretty sure we all do. So that's big for us too.
Absolutely, and we're working on the audio. I think we're getting a little bit of scratchy audio out there. I think Dave's back there working on it as well. And then go ahead, Dave and Adair.
Really, I think it's going to be a great show. I'm interested to hear what Lee Camp has to say, and what everyone else has. We know what's going on. Because personally, I'm moving down to Thurston County, so these commissioner races, it just goes kind of to show that everything is local. And there's actually been some advertisements I'd like to talk about paid for by a group in Washington to get people to vote.
Interesting, absolutely. We'll definitely cover that. And Dave?
Well, I think it's pretty cool that we've been able to pick up on some of the Jill Stein events that are happening, and we did a little Stalking Bernie last summer, and I think Stalking Stein, trying to get her information out, is going to be something that we should focus on. So we're picking up anytime we see a stream or something and somebody's available, we're going to try to bring it to you. We also had a Jamu Baraka. He was speaking on that same video, the one we're going to watch. They were Jill was at the University of Southern Maine, Portland. I'm not sure where Jamu was, but they were both live streaming on the same day. So that was great. Yeah, the Lee Camp interview looks great. We've got a little clip from our 911 show, which is starting to get a lot of views right now. We talked about some interesting subjects about the new investigation that's going on. We can take a look at a clip of that. And there's some stuff in the news around Edward Snowden and his pardon and some other things going on. So yeah, good show today.
All right, and so I just wanted to say thank you everyone for tuning in. Again, this is Project Sanity, and if you want to make sure to catch those shows that we were talking about, or clips or coverage, when it goes live, make sure to subscribe down at the bottom of the video there, and it'll make sure to notify you. Make sure to have your notifications on whenever we go live, as well as our normal Thursday show. And so going off of that, I think the first clip that we were going to go to was Jill Stein speaking at the university, as you mentioned. So I'll just give Dave a moment to cue that up. While he does, we are definitely going to be having Jim Cooper on later. He'll be joining us about 4:30 for an interview, and we look forward to that. And it looks like Dave is ready with the video, so we'll go ahead and run that for you guys.
Why should a generation of young people be walking around with that burden on their shoulders after Wall Street tore up the contract? Somehow the Democrats and the Republicans saw it in their hearts to come up with $16 trillion to bail out the crooks on Wall Street. Well, if they could come up with $16 trillion to bail out the crooks, it's time to come up with $1.5 trillion. It's a much smaller price tag to bail out the victims of Wall Street. And paying for that is not like some kind of rocket science. We can pay for that by creating a tiny tax, for example, on Wall Street, which is the only sector of the economy, the most profitable sector of the economy that doesn't pay a sales tax like everybody else does. By insisting that Wall Street kick in their fair share, we have more than enough, hundreds of billions of dollars to pay down that debt. But there's another place that we can come up with that money from, by cutting this bloated and dangerous military budget that is making us endangered, not safe. So just to be clear about it, as a parent, you don't throw your kid into the ocean and say, here, I hope you can swim. You don't do that. You teach them how to swim first. Well, right now, our economy is like some really dangerous body of water. People need to know. They need to have the skills in order to survive in this economy. In the same way that we paid for high school education in the 20th century so that people had the skills to survive, it's time to pay for the skills people need to survive in the 21st century, and that is free public higher education. Its time has come. And by the way, I'm sure you've heard about the guilt trip that says, you know, you took out those loans, you've got to pay it back. Well, forget that guilt trip, because no society has ever survived by devouring its young. But we have a predatory economy that's doing exactly that. So we say it's time to put our younger generation front and center. The money is not an issue. We know for every dollar we put into higher education, we actually get back $7 in improved benefits and in actually improved revenue as well. So it more than pays for itself. Forget the guilt trip. This is the right thing to do, and it is the stimulus package of our dreams to actually bail out this generation of young people that's ready to go to work on your passion, on your dreams, on the things that you are already trained to do. Let's get you out of these low-wage, part-time, temporary, insecure jobs and get you into the small businesses, the nonprofits, and the worker cooperatives, creating the economy of the future.
There we go. And there we saw Jill speaking at the University of Southern Maine, Portland, Maine. And I think she was speaking about some important aspects regarding our future generations and what we're going to do to prepare them for the challenges that they face in the future. And so thoughts on that, Adair? Okay, we'll go to Eric first.
Well, I totally agree with her. It's funny because somebody was talking the other day about a state bank, and it's kind of relevant because they're like, well, where do I get the money to create a state bank? And it's like, well, it's all on Wall Street. So all I have to do is stop putting the money in the wrong places. And it's a great point that she makes in the beginning of that that really stands out the most to me. Why can we bail out Wall Street but not bail out our people? I think the citizens of the United States need to be treated as more of a priority than corporations, and that's just what it boils down to. So I totally agree with what she said in that regard.
Agreed. Adair, are you ready?
Yeah, just had muted myself, folks at home. So I agree with what Joe's saying, 100%. The things that people are going to run into problems with is people in general don't have an understanding of how the economy is going to be working, how, we can say that we have the money there, right? We do have it. It's trying to convince people without over-explaining how you move that money around. Banks are excellent at moving money around and then telling you how they're not actually doing it. So we've got to start at a grassroots level, educating folks, educating other voters, and be like, well, here's how we can move the money to places where we want it. Personally, as someone in student loan debt, I think that loan debt should be forgiven because I'm going to be taking a job that's going to be paying quite well. I'll be paying more than what I owe in student loans and taxes over my lifetime. And so to add in that additional loan that I probably won't pay off until after I'm dead seems a little excessive.
Absolutely. And I mean, it reminds me of the message that Bernie was saying regarding education and how we're going to get there, the refrain of a small tax on Wall Street, and that it's important in order to prepare students for the future to be able to give them that access to that education regardless of the conditions of their parenting. And that's always been one of the things that's always rung out to me, is that it doesn't make sense to me to burden some children with massive college debt because their parents weren't fortunate or successful or whatever, and to take another group of students and they won't have that burden as a result of their parents' work. Now, I understand that when parents work, one of the reasons that they do put so much effort into what they do is to provide for their kids so that they can have a little bit better than what they had. But I don't think that should stop with just their children or with just the children of folks who are more successful. I think it makes sense for it to be spread out in such a way that any child that has the will, desire, and was willing to put in the effort and has the basic necessities, faculties that it'll take to succeed should have that access. And so I think it's a small price to pay, and like you said, it's a great investment in our future, I think. And I think next, we're going to go to Eric's video interview with Lee Camp from TYT. And one of the questions we're going to be highlighting, you'll be able to find the entire interview posted later on the channel. So if you again want to see that, make sure to subscribe and check out when it goes live. But this one, I believe, is him answering a question about Jill Stein. So we'll go ahead and let Dave play that when it's ready.
So, just to correct you on step in, but he's actually from RT America, Richard.
Or, excuse me, RT America.
All the acronyms are all confusing. My bad.
I just always see him with that hashtag. I think it's part of what it did.
So one of the many things that I would say that myself and my viewers have in common with you, or Project Sanity's viewers have in common with you, is the support for the Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein. What makes you like her? I mean, obviously, I don't think I've seen that you've officially endorsed her, but I saw you in Philadelphia at a lot of the same events as her, and you've talked about her a lot. Obviously, she did a little bit on your show either last week or the week before. What makes you like Jill Stein?
Oh, I think Jill's great, and I even performed at a campaign rally for her in 2012, and then I went out to the Hofstra debates and the outskirts of the debates where she was and where she ended up getting arrested. And so, it's not just this year that I think she's been doing good, important things, and there's really little that Jill Stein says that I disagree with. I mean, some of the biggest things are like being against the Trans-Pacific Partnership and these trade deals that are designed to, make the world a nice, comfy place for corporations so they can abuse us as easily as possible. And, it's everything from that to not being a fan of student loan debt and how it enslaves people to create careers they hate, lives they hate, and it's just insane. We live in a world where there's more wealth than ever before, record-breaking wealth, and yet at the same time we have record-breaking poverty and record-breaking child poverty and hungry children, and it's a completely nonsensical way to live, and I think as a candidate she gets that, and most candidates even most Democrats and maybe even some of the left-leaning Democrats don't seem to. They may want to tweak some things here and there, but they don't understand what a crucial time we live in and how little time we have left to really change course. So, some people want to call like Jill Stein's plans or Green Party plans drastic or unrealistic to shift our entire economy to a green economy within, only 15 or 25 years or whatever. But what's more drastic or unrealistic, that or the idea of just going on the way we're going and destroying every last chance at our ability to survive on this planet in a sustainable way? To me, that sounds like the most unrealistic, most illogical way to go forward. So anybody who wants to tell you, oh, we can't, her plans are crackpot, we can't do what they're proposing, well, the other option is to kill ourselves. So
yeah, I think that they tend to do that because they just want to they call her a crackpot and her ideas crackpot because they just want to take the attention away from the corporate tax loopholes, the Wall Street bullies, and the massive outrageous military spending that could easily be spent on education. I mean, we're throwing away fighter jets for no apparent reason with money that could be putting our children in school. And it's just, yeah, they just want to paint an image that she's crazy so that we don't look further into it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the dirty secret that I think a lot of the true elite, the wealthy of the wealthy, understand that they don't want to mention to us is that they get that this is unsustainable. They get that we can't live in this way. Most of them get that we can't live in this way forever. I mean, the 6 heirs of the Walmart fortune have the same amount of wealth as the bottom 40% of America. It's, hundreds of millions of people. And they know that can't exist like that. It's impossible. Our economy is completely top heavy. Our economy is set up like Chris Christie riding on the shoulders of Natalie Portman. It just doesn't. It can't sustain, and they get that, but most of them are greedy enough and sociopathic enough to think, well, let's just exploit this as much as we can while the gravy train is still rolling. Grab all the money bags while the place burns down.
And then we saw Eric with Lee Camp from Redacted Tonight. That's Lee Camp from Redacted Tonight. Just want to make sure I get that right this time. Sorry about that, guys. I've been a little discombobulated lately. But Eric, if you want to tell us a little bit more about your feelings on his response and some of the other teasers for the interview you might want to drop.
Yeah, Lee was awesome, man. I was really excited to do it. I'm a big fan of his work. The only way I ever kind of disagreed with him was a few of the ways he slammed Bernie Sanders. But other than that, Lee did really good. I think he definitely was a down-to-earth guy. Didn't talk like he was some big star, which he's quickly becoming. And he even sent me a text afterwards and just said, keep fighting. And so I think that was pretty amazing. He definitely has his thoughts together, does his research. A lot of complaints about satirical news shows is the fact that a lot of these people don't necessarily know the politics side. They just know enough to make jokes about it. And he's definitely done his research. He's definitely about it. He's definitely out there fighting for what he believes in. So I thought it was amazing. And I think I hope to work with him in the future and maybe get to talk to him again.
Excellent. I just want to remind everybody we're going to be having Jim Cooper joining us very shortly in just a few more minutes. But before that, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in, sticking through. I know we had some audio issues at the top of the show, but it sounds like they should be resolved. Just go ahead and let us know if we're having any more. Also, I guess I want to give Adair an opportunity. Your thoughts on what you've heard from Lee's interview so far?
I'm intrigued. I think, like many of our other viewers, I'll probably be watching the whole interview as soon as it goes live. Folks who are, may drop a comment in the thing, and we can discuss it while we're there. But I think he's made some valid points. There are some things that I am interested in. I had no idea that he followed Jill around in 2012, nor that she got arrested after a fringe debate. I mean, we can debate her tactics all day, but I think that's the level of dedication you're not going to see from a lot of mainstream media sources, especially in that now that third-party candidates are coming to arise, they're only really focusing on Johnson. So I'm really interested to hear his thoughts just on the election cycle in general.
And I've noticed one thing I've picked up on from the short time that I've been paying closer attention to Jill is that she is not afraid to get down in the trenches. She'll be in the front lines of the protests, or whether it's a union line or anything along those lines is one of the things I remember from Bernie, which I appreciate in her. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what she's able to accomplish this election cycle, and where she's able to take it after the election happens, and if she's able to capture and motivate a lot of the people that were definitely supportive of Bernie and feel as if there's nowhere for them to go to one degree or another. And I see Dave is getting us set up, so it'll just be a couple more moments before we bring Jim on. Just a quick reminder, Jim is running in Thurston County for the commissioner position as a Democrat. Last week we had someone else running for basically similar position, different actual position, but same title. But we'll have him on to kind of give us a bit of an idea for those of us who didn't see last week's show, to what the position is and what he thinks he's going to accomplish with it. And so with that, I will go ahead and welcome Jim onto the show. So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and just welcome.
Hi there, welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the first things I wanted to start with is actually, Eric went ahead and did the legwork to get you on. So I want to give Eric an opportunity to go ahead and tell us a little bit more about what his interaction has been down there. He's also in the Thurston County area.
Great.
Yeah, so Jim, the first time I met Jim was he was at a caucus event for the Democrats where I was running for delegate, and he was just talking to me. We were just talking. I had no idea he was an Olympia City Council member. And then all of a sudden he tells me, and I'm like, wow, our business just got broken into. And he's like, what? They didn't do anything? And it, very down to earth, which was pretty awesome to me. Every interaction I've ever had with Jim, I really appreciate his willingness to talk about things that other politicians won't talk about. He doesn't give me the impression that he's too big to talk about something. He's a very, very, very busy guy with all the things he does in our community. Is it the United Way that you also work for?
Yes, I work for United Ways of the Pacific Northwest, which is the trade association for United Way in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. So I do public policy training and technical assistance for 39 United Ways.
Gee, see, and plus you're already on city council, plus you're running for a campaign, and I don't know.
And I have a 4-year-old.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. That definitely doesn't make things any easier. Yeah, I just started my Washington State Treasurer campaign as a write-in. I'm actually going to be taking off here soon to go to try to get an LD endorsement. So I know how busy it is. I just do this and now that. And I also have a 10-year-old, and I don't have a 9-to-5. So it's crazy. I know you're a busy guy. I've been trying to get you on for a while, but glad we could finally connect. So one of the things we asked Kelsey last week, and I just want to make a disclaimer because at one point somebody said that you guys were opponents, which is not true. You're running for District 1 and District 2 for Thurston County Commissioner. A lot of people don't understand the importance of the commissioner position. And so if you could just explain to us what the Thurston County Commissioner's responsibilities are and kind of ways maybe you want to revolutionize the position.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the first thing to say is how important this year is for Thurston County. And if people don't know, county commissions are typically three members. In the bigger counties like King County, where Seattle is, or Pierce County, where Tacoma is, they have a county charter and they've gone to a county council with more members. So we have 3 members, and this year 2 of our longtime Democratic county commissioners are retiring. And just 2 years ago, 1 Democrat lost in the general election and was replaced by a so-called independent. Now this year, Kelsey and I, both of our opponents in the general election, are calling themselves independent and talking about the hardest right that you can possibly imagine for what is really one of the most progressive counties in Thurston County. So I think it's really important for people to understand that the balance of power in Thurston County is really hanging with a big threat to it right now. And if Kelsey and I don't both win, we'll see some huge setbacks in the areas of the environment, public health, probably law and justice. Both of our opponents are retired police officers. So I just want to make sure I say that up front, so people are kind of aware of how important it is this year. As for what a county commissioner does, you're responsible for everything that a city is, as far as roads and policing, only for the unincorporated areas of the county. But then countywide, the county does everything like we have the assessor's office, the treasurer's office, the coroner's office. And the county commissioner does the budgets for all of those, including the county sheriff. And then the county board of commissioners is also the board of health for Thurston County. So they're responsible for all of the restaurant inspections and the public health and mental health system, the substance abuse and violence prevention and treatment system. So they have a pretty significant role, and they're the legislative branch and the executive branch in some ways, and sometimes they even play a judicial role in some land use decisions. So it's a big job. They annually pass about a $325 million budget and try to provide the right services to the county, most of which are prescribed by state law. So the county's real job is to implement state law. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no. It was a great answer. So one of the things that really first made you stand out to me, Jim, was you gave a speech back at, I believe it was the Thurston County Convention. It may have been the LD2 convention. And you had brought up some numbers that were staggering to me about the poverty in Thurston County, and how it really is a way bigger issue than things seem in Thurston County. It's not necessarily known as a poverty-riddled area, but it really is. Can you talk a little bit about that and a $15 an hour minimum wage and those sort of things for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my work at United Way, we commissioned a study with Rutgers University back in New Jersey called ALICE, which is Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. And we looked at every county, every city, and every census tract in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho to essentially analyze the working poor and compare the cost of living to the federal poverty line, which, if you don't know, the federal poverty line was established in 1974, the year I was born, based on groceries being the cost of 1/3 of an average household income. It hasn't been changed. And so when we looked at the cost of living, for instance, in Thurston County, you find that the federal poverty line is about 15%, like it is statewide. But when you look at the real costs for housing, transportation, childcare, healthcare, taxes, you find that the people who are struggling to get by countywide are actually about 30%. And when you drill into some of our South County communities, our more rural communities, you're seeing upwards of 50 or 60% of the folks being ALICE, which is a combination of the poverty line plus the people who are living right on the threshold of being able to get by. So 50% of our community in some places really not being able to, one broken down car or one broken appliance away from not being able to feed their kids or possibly even losing their home. And so for me, that's the kind of thing that motivates me to serve my community. I think that the opportunity gap, if you will, in the United States has gotten too large, and we really need to figure out a way to change the balance so that we can stabilize and grow the middle class. Frankly, that's the key to our country succeeding, I think, and especially our local community here in Thurston County. So a friend quoted this to me just recently: if the middle class is stable, the poor people can have mobility. And so we really have to have a solid middle class. And so in the city council, I've advocated for a $15 an hour minimum wage, but I've been really clear that that's not the only answer to anything. In fact, that's still not enough in almost any family in America. And so looking at doing economic development to make sure we're growing jobs, and then also making sure that we have the right social services and tax credits in place. I've been advocating to grow the earned income tax credit at the federal level, and working on trying to get it funded in Washington State so that working families can have more opportunities to succeed. And I could talk about this all day, so let me pause and just kind of let you run the interview.
Well, yeah, no, that's fine, because actually, so a big thing we do on our show is we let viewers ask questions, and we try to ask the questions to the guests that we have on, and so it gives you an opportunity to win voters, Jim. So we have a question from Clay Johnson, who I know is a voter in Thurston County, and he said, what is the first step Jim is going to act on in order to make his plan come to fruition? How will he make it a reality?
I think the first thing in Thurston County is to make sure that we're working on economic development, and then that we have some work in place to make sure that we're not losing companies, and make sure that we're attracting the right kinds of companies that have good living wage jobs. We also need to pay really close attention to the state in Thurston County. The number one employer in Thurston County is Washington State, and so when the state has a problem, it hits us really hard. I would compare it to the factories in the Midwest. If they cut staff, the towns dry up, and that's kind of the way Olympia and Thurston County are. So we got to make sure that we make and retain jobs, and that we also have the ability to work with our state government and try to influence its ability to be successful, because there aren't a lot of good progressive counties in Washington State, because the rural folks try to sort of trend the elected officials more towards the right than the broader population is, if that makes any sense at all. So that's my answer right now. But on top of all of that, we have to bolster our mental health system. We have to make sure that we're not locking people up in prison when they have mental health issues, and make sure that people who aren't a threat to society are able to stay in their home and stay with their family. And that means expanding our options programs in the justice system, so we can help people get rehabilitated, or not put them in jail for silly things that just cost us money and don't help anyone.
So just curious, are silly things marijuana? Mm-hmm.
Well, it's interesting. So I spent about 8 years working in substance abuse and violence prevention work, and actually was I worked against the privatization of liquor, and I didn't really get involved in the marijuana legalization. But one thing I did have the opportunity to do was look around and see who's in jail, and talk to sheriffs and police chiefs around Western Washington, who's in jail for marijuana alone. And that was actually pretty rare. Most of the time they're putting people in jail with, possession charge as a secondary charge, and they found some other reason to keep them in jail. But yes, there is no reason in my mind to lock anyone up for possession. And in this day and age, there's really not a reason to be enforcing very much of the federal marijuana law. I've been kind of discouraged about some of the things I've been hearing in the last several weeks since July 1st, when the medical system changed over to the state run.
Yes,
that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that soon, because I've been frontline to that, and it's been horrible. But it actually was kind of, this interview worked out well, because we had another question. They kind of made some comments, so I'm assuming their question was about locking people up for marijuana. So another thing that I would like to personally, that's a big issue for me, is clean energy, and I don't know if that is something that the commissioner can influence. So if it's not, if you could at least speak to your opinion on that, and if it is something the commissioner can influence, what can the commissioner do to work Thurston County towards a clean energy future?
Yeah, definitely. So we have some influence, and I think that there's probably more influence we could have if we really push the limits on public health, because I think it's about time to declare, our environment is in a public health crisis when it comes to global warming. And so with that, we have energy problems with too much carbon, and then we also have sea level rise. And so those are both huge threats to the government as well as to the broader community. The predictions we're getting is that we need to be able to protect all of our infrastructure from up to 6-foot floods in any low-lying area. So even away from the water, we have the issue with the sea level rise. But back to your original question, I'm an advocate for having the county develop a countywide energy plan that's sustainable and hopefully locally owned and operated over a 30 or a 50-year period. Not talking about establishing a power company, but talking about a good plan where first the county looks at its own energy waste and production to find out how it can produce its own energy from its own work, One of the keys to that is building a new county courthouse. We have a building that's built in the 1970s. A new courthouse could pay for itself in 30 to 50 years and not be wasting the kind of energy that it is now. And then once we have our own house in order, we look out, or at the same time, if we have the resources, and work with the broader community to look for incentives for using clean energy, for developing your own power on site, and then begin to have conversations about the regulatory approach to get there. Because the reality is that, and I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but in the documents that we signed, at least in the city of Olympia and the Paris Accord for climate change, we have to get back to pre-1990 levels of carbon emissions in about 10 years. And it's a significant change. And we're going to have a dramatic shift in culture for how we think about energy, how we act around energy. And frankly, to me, the key of that is getting as many cars off the road as possible, because that's the place where we're spewing awful stuff into the sky that's making it hard for kids to grow up healthy and hard for us to combat the crisis that's affecting our globe.
So yeah, I think clean energy is very important. I think that from my perspective, a state bank would be another thing that could be awesome in terms of getting clean energy going. So Adair Schmidt, I'm going to pass it off to him. He's just so you know, he's moving down to Thurston County pretty soon here. I think before the election, right, Adair?
Yes, I moved.
And he was sorry, Adair. He was a national Bernie delegate,
Cool.
and so he was definitely back there anxious to ask some questions. He's had conversations with Kelsey, but I don't think he's been able to have conversations with you yet. So we're going to hand it off to him real quick and let him ask you some questions.
Hi there. I was actually a national delegate for Obama in 2008, so I know how your experience was probably a little different than that, but pretty good time and pretty powerful to be a part of, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a life-altering event meeting, especially because I got to meet so many state-level reps, so a lot of the people in Olympia that I can go bug now when I have issues, since I'll actually be living right off Division. So
oh wow, right on. Okay, over on the
I'll be
west
just
side.
down the street from Evergreen. I actually happen to be a greener. So those that's one of the biggest, one of the things I have to ask you about. So when I was a child, I lived in Thurston County for a little bit. I lived in Yelm when Yelm was a road and not much else. So I've seen the kind of population boom that's happened in Thurston County, and I also know that there's about 4,000, at any given time, there's about 4,000 students attending the Evergreen State College, myself being one of them. How do you make it a more friendly environment for college students? Because a lot of college students are falling well below the poverty line. It makes it much harder. It's hard to go to school as is and then find work when most of the jobs, especially in the area, are saying we need you 40 hours a week. Most of us are committing at least 16 hours a week to class. Some committing even up to 20 hours. So this makes it, it's a drain really on some of the public assistance programs out there, because college students are unable to stay afloat. And if college students, since most of us, I believe 75% of the student body at Evergreen is a state resident, such as myself, it perpetuates the cycle within the state of poverty where we attend college, we try to get the degree, we end up in a massive amount of debt, we're unable to work, and it suddenly falls apart and fizzles because there's a combination of jobs that are not friendly to college students. There's not a lot of affordable housing, especially for those who can only work 10 to 15 hours a week. The transit system is much better than it has been, but it also makes it harder for students who live somewhere like Centralia, who live way far south, who want to try to come up north to get to one of the best schools in Washington, which just happens to be in Thurston County. How are ways that we attack these issues? Because it doesn't just affect us as students, it affects families, low-income families. Many of us, we belong to one of those. So how would you make it a more inviting environment work-wise for students and people who are limited in their ability to work many hours a week?
Yeah, definitely. So it's actually a great question. On Monday, I was at the White House meeting with administrative staff from the Department of Education and from Obama's staff to talk about College Promise, which is their plan for 2 years of free community college for every American. And one of the things that was said is right now we're at a point in our society where 70% of all jobs require something after high school. And we're going to be at 90% very soon. And so how can we change our structures and make it so we're not emphasizing that 4-year degree as much and have more opportunities for 2-year degrees and technical schools that can generate an income faster and in some ways even better than a 4-year degree, depending on your interest levels. But locally, there's a lot we can do to help try to think about whether there's a way to have a local college promise program. Like they have a privately funded college promise program in Michigan, in Kalamazoo, and several places around the country that would be good opportunities for Thurston County to look at. We have an income tax on the ballot in November in Olympia that will pay for 2 years of free community college. I'm not supporting that, not because I don't think there needs to be a change in the taxes or because I don't think there needs to be that program, but it's not very well written, and I don't think it's the right kind of policy the way it was written this time, but it's a good idea. So we can look at those kind of opportunities. And then lastly, I think we have to do everything we can to bring the students into the community. So I know that our mayor and other elected officials, including myself, have talked to the president of Evergreen about having a presence in downtown and maybe creating a satellite campus in downtown so that we can have the students be more close to the resources, because there's actually kids living way out there that come into downtown to use the food bank while they go to school, and that's not okay with me. So that's a couple of ideas, but the root of that is really a lot more of a state or a federal issue.
Okay, and I can definitely understand that because it is a state college. One of the things that I do have a big question for you, and this is particularly poignant to me as a person of color moving to an area like Olympia. So, excuse me, I haven't had a chance to meet you and talk with you before, and some of our viewers won't know this as well. I was born in Seattle. I lived in the Central District in Seattle, a historically black neighborhood. I've grown up in Tacoma. I've grown up in large cities in Washington State, where there is a large population of people of color, and even here, and now I live in University Place, a subsect of Tacoma, where we're dealing with intense police scrutiny, intense suspicion, intense fear, and a lot of times out-and-out racism, where a lot of us are afraid. We're routinely stopped when we call the police. I've had guns pulled on me by police officers after I've called them because my house was shot at. They've pulled their weapon in an area where they're constantly surrounded by people of color in their daily life so long as they live in the city. Now, going down to a county like Thurston County, which is more representative of Washington as a whole, where there's not a very large population of people of color, I'm quite frankly worried about what my interactions with police are going to be like, especially since in the last year we've had 2 young men who were unarmed already shot with police. A man came from Aberdeen, I believe it was, and stabbed somebody because he thought there was black people who were writing hateful messages towards police, which I'm sure some of us probably did, but I don't think that warrants us being stabbed. So as a county commissioner, and you're going to be someone working hand in hand with law enforcement, how do you make those interactions less dangerous for all parties involved?
Yeah, boy, I just want to apologize for America that you have to deal with that as a person of color. It's pretty sick to me that we've gotten to this point in this country where we don't value our differences as the thing that makes our country great. And so that's hindsight. But looking forward, I think there's a lot of things we can do to bring our community together. And I'll tell you that while there are a few examples here, we're a lot more safe and in a lot better place, at least in the general urban area of Thurston County, than a lot of places that you might move in the United States. The thing for me is, and we've been working on this actually a lot longer than there was an officer involved shooting in Olympia. But the thing for me about this is really about flipping the culture of police and how we interact with our police in our community, and getting to a point where our police are actually examining their racial biases and are trained in that way. I've heard people say that police are trained, for weeks and weeks on how to use their weapons and guns, but very little time on how they think and how they interact and how they make decisions based on their own internal bias. And I have a lot of training in communication, and all of this comes down to communication and ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes to some extent, to try and understand where they're coming from. And I think we're getting to a point now where while it might not feel this way to most people or look this way when you look at the TV, that most law enforcement are starting to get that and trying to figure out how to get their department through the culture shift to get there, because it takes one. And then along with that, you know, we might look all white in Olympia, but we do have some great, wonderful leaders that are of color, and a good, you know, population of people of color. You know, it's, while not a huge percentage of the community, it's a powerful percentage of the community. And so making sure that those folks are represented in our lawmaking and in our policing, and that's been really hard to do. And I've asked on camera the police chief a couple of times, you know, how do we get people of color on the police department, and how do we change our hiring practices so we can do that? And you know, unfortunately, I think sometimes we set up systems that we think are going to work for that, and they backfire on us, and we end up not having the people of color even apply so they can get the chance to be screened in a fair way. And a lot of that is because I think, you know, I mentioned this, our differences are what make us great. And so for me, it's not, doesn't feel right to have the hiring practice be blind. So knowing what you're getting and who you're looking at up front may be a conversation that we have, versus a lot of these police hiring practices are blind, and they don't even know the race or color of the person until they get to a in-person interview. And while I don't want to bring more opportunity or option for prejudice, I do think there has to be some conversation about how to get to a point where it's easier to hire people of color and see them in the process as equals to people with equivalent training, education, and experience.
I definitely appreciate that answer. I appreciate the willingness to confront these problems head on. It's something we don't see quite often, frankly, in communities of color. There's oftentimes this level of, we'll do it yourself, or, you know, that pull yourself by your bootstraps mentality. And I appreciate that you are willing, as an elected official, to come to bat for all of your constituents. That's something I haven't seen throughout a lot of these races, and I really do appreciate that. I only have one more question for you, then I'll toss it over to Richard. We've talked about poverty, right? We've talked about poverty, especially as it pertains to a rural county like Thurston, where there is, at one point at least, there was nothing but farmland when I remember growing up there, and now we're starting to see some housing developments and some apartments. How do we make equitable income? Housing? How do we get affordable housing? What percentage of new apartments and buildings would you want to see marked off exclusively for low-income families? And how would you expand the transit system for poor people? Right now, I know that there's a program where you can ride for free to job interviews and things like that if you're a low-income person. Would you support expanding programs like that throughout the county and making it more accessible to those in the more rural areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the transit one comes down to money, unfortunately. And so I don't know if you were here still, but we don't have bus service in South County at all. We have what's called the Rural and Tribal Transit, which is a van that drives a fixed route 2 or 3 times a day into South County, but isn't nearly adequate for the kind of access to the community. And it's actually a huge barrier for the most poor people who tend to live further out in the rural areas. When it comes to affordable housing, I've been an advocate for us putting an affordable housing levy to the voters, so that we can create some tax dollars that will build affordable housing complexes. But stepping back from that a minute, I think my gut has always said, and I know they've been successful with this in Portland and a couple of other cities, that if you're going to build a housing complex of, say, 10 units as a good even example, that some percentage of those units should be low income or affordable housing. Some percentage of those units should be middle income or middle income housing, and then the remainder should be market rate. And that should essentially reflect the population. So if we're at 30% or 40% people who are in the Alice category in the city of Olympia, I would say 30 or 40% of all of the housing that is built needs to be affordable. In downtown Olympia, we were at a point where we had about 80% of our housing being affordable, or even now I lost the word, like Section 8, like low income government sustained housing. and then now we've had some bigger, more market rate housing developments come in, and all of our affordable housing is full. And it's that way in almost every town. And when you get out into places like Tenino or Yelm, there's very little affordable housing that's safe, so your family can, get by, because there's a lot of affordable out there, but the safety factor or the location make it less than desirable. So I really think this is a place the government needs to get involved in a bigger way to force policies that say, if you're going to build more than one unit, you need to have some consideration or some requirement for different strata of housing in there. I don't think we're going to get enough without doing that.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm going to toss it over to Richard. Sorry for taking so long, my friend.
Oh, no, you had some very excellent questions, you and Eric as well, and I appreciate those answers. They're very thoughtful and thorough, and so I appreciate that. One of the things that came to my mind when you were mentioning the role of race in the police and what that feels like in Olympia, what came to my mind was in 2015, I believe, there was 2 young men that had allegedly, like, they were walking down the street and a cop was responding to a report of some guys stealing some beer from a local grocery store. They fled on foot and retreated into the woods, and the officer said that he was attacked by a skateboard but uninjured, and it resulted in one of them being shot and I believe possibly paralyzed from the waist down. That was as of 2015, the report that I saw. And so I think and you mentioned about trying to look at each other as equivalents and treating people with dignity and respect and so forth. And so I think one of the roles that or one of the key components of that is adequate training, is that if somebody's accused of stealing beer and they're running away and or coming back at you with a skateboard, I don't think the appropriate, whether legal or not, outcome should be somebody getting shot. It should be to me viewed as a failing of both the community in order for the crime to arise in the first place, and of the community and the police again for losing a citizen for what seems to be a relatively petty crime that escalated rapidly as a result of how it was pursued. So I wonder what role would the commissioner possibly have at helping to encourage that type of training, and what kind of approach, you mentioned your communication experience, what kind of approach so that the police don't feel attacked, but that we just feel like they're not being appropriately trained to handle and behave in the manner that we're expecting them as a community.
Yeah. So right after that incident, and I won't get too much into the details of that case because I'm on the city council and it's sort of related to how we operate within our police department, but I'll speak about it a little more generally. But we did enhance our police training by $500,000 right away, and we're in the process of building a community policing package, which gives us the ability to keep that training fund going over the long term. And then, I think we really have to look at how police operate, because the fundamental thing for me is that regardless of what happened with those 2 young men and that officer that evening, the officer should have never been by himself in the dark to have that interaction in the first place. So how are we doing backup, and how are we responding, and when do you get out of your car? I've listened to the tapes of the 911 calls, and there were probably 4 or even 5 or 6 units within 2 or 3 minutes of him when he got out of his car. So how could that interaction have been changed if he had just waited a couple of minutes? And I think everyone knows that for the most part, when you get more than one person in a situation, you check each other's behavior and check each other's biases a little bit more. And frankly, though, a lot of it, you still gotta make sure that you're doing that inherent. Do I have a bias? Because while you might not think race is involved, you know what neighborhood you're in, right? Or who lives in the part of town that you're in, and that it's more people of color than it is in the neighborhood you live in. And so automatically there's things that you think about or ways that you might change your behavior that aren't conscious, and they're not decisions that you're making. You're just doing it. And then all that aside, I'll say we still need to make sure that people meet or have consequences if they break the law or they don't treat officers with respect, because I think in that situation, and not all. In fact, I know there's a lot of really strong cases where law enforcement have really messed up. But we have to realize that everyone has to have a certain level of demeanor and professionalism and accountability and respect on both sides for this to work. And that involves
so long as
people
the
working.
consequence for disrespect isn't penalty, death sentence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't get the death penalty for disrespect, but you
it can go a long way to make the interaction better for everyone, and it's a touchy subject, I think, in that we're proud free Americans and that we want our Fourth Amendment rights, our First Amendment rights, and our Second Amendment rights for that matter, and so we don't want to be slowly reaching for a wallet that was requested and an officer taking the person's attire too far into consideration and responding, and I'll leave that one at that, but the other one
let me add one more sentence on that one, because I think the key to this for me is police and children interacting at a very young age. So when we have school resource officers, we have them mostly in the high schools. If we had school resource officers that were focused on hanging out with elementary school kids and building the relationship, so hey Officer Bob or hey Officer Fred, them, especially in a community the size of Olympia, you're going to know them, you're going to grow up around them, you're going to know their kids and their family. And at that point, the biases tend to be less present because we've grown up with each other and we know each other. And that's the fundamental piece, is we don't know each other. And sometimes we tend to think that you're going to be hurtful because of how you're dressed, how you're acting, or how you look. And it's not okay.
Yeah, and I think that feeling of being threatened, whether it's the officer or it's the individual citizen, that is a key component in a lot of when these things go wrong. And so by engaging each other in the community outside of those types of interactions, it helps build a relationship where somebody doesn't see an officer and immediately think of a threat rather than the idea of a protector, or somebody that they can rely on for security. And so one of the other things I wanted to mention, and you kind of touched on it a bit again at the end, is whether it's education or whatever it is. One of the things that stuck out to me when you're talking about the calculation of poverty is childcare has significantly gone up as a portion of people's expenses as a result of more families having two parents that are working. And so that the child is home alone for a more significant amount of time. And one of the issues that you're kind of somewhat at the mercy of whatever comes down from the federal level, but what are some of the things that you think can be done to address that specifically at the county level? And one of the questions I know you mentioned before is about finding money. You mentioned we're able to find $500,000 for police training in that area. And Jill mentioned at the top of the show, I'm not sure if you had joined us yet, that a lot of it has to do with prioritization. So that the money is limited, and raising taxes is one way to get more revenue, but what are we doing to what kind of priority shifting are we going? Would we be seeing, or would want to guide from your position as commissioner? I guess you can take that second part first.
Yeah, well, and to me, you hit the nail on the head. The more we can do for our kids at a young age, the better off our whole community is going to be in the long run. So in my work at United Way, we in Washington State 2 years ago, we passed the Early Start Act, that we came up with $300 million more for early learning and early learning programs, because they're the most important thing. Like, if you're not ready to go to kindergarten, the likelihood that you're going to not graduate high school is extremely high, and you can almost predict it. And so one of the best models I like so far, and it's not implemented yet, but the voters have passed in the city of Seattle just 2 years ago. They passed a property tax increase that creates a universal pre-K program that every single kid in the city can access. Right now, we don't have that. In fact, about 60% of our kids are in in-home care with a family member, and it's not any certified program. So nobody knows what they're learning or what they're doing. So we need to look at getting to a point in our society where we have universal pre-K, we have universal secondary education for at least the first 2 years. And I think that'll do a lot to move our society in the right way. And when you talk about prioritization, man, that's hard. I'm the chair of the finance committee for the city of Olympia, and trying to decide whether you fund firefighters or building inspectors they both have a public safety role, right? So what's the first priority? And you kind of got to go with your gut in each situation. The biggest priority shift that I have in mind right now is to do everything we can to reduce our reliance on the justice system. It's consuming 75% of our county budget, and it's I don't want to say anything derogatory, but the way we do law and justice in the county is not nearly as progressive as it is in the city. And so we have some opportunities to bring people together to enhance our options programs and our problem solving courts so we can keep people out of jail. I mean, one of the things we're doing right now, we have probably 150 prisoners a night that we send to Lewis County, so the next county over. We pay for them to have a contract jail bed, and they get no restorative services at all. And they won't take our hardest criminals. So we end up sending the lowest hanging fruit for rehabilitation to another jail in a more conservative community where they don't get any help. And that's a problem. And so we have to figure out a way to get ahead of that curve. And unfortunately, I think in the short term, it will cost more money because we'll have to do both. But if we can make that investment, I'm certain that in a decade or less, we can reduce the need to spend that much money on law and justice. It's just disgusting where we've gotten in our society with how much that programming and that work consumes and hurts people. You shouldn't be, making a mistake when you're 17 years old is one thing, but losing your ability to ever succeed as an adult because of it, I have a problem with that, especially when I know from brain science that your brain isn't fully developed to make decisions or reason until you're 21 or 25 years old. And we're locking people up at 18 years old and throwing away the key.
Well, and it is an unfortunate reality that too many Americans are facing, not just in Washington or Thurston County, but across the country. And hopefully you'll be able to do what you can from your role to help give some insight and perhaps role model some options as to how you can take something that's not necessarily as effective as it could or should be and move it towards that way. And so with that, we've been mentioning, we lost your video there for a moment, but been running your website on the bottom there. But if you just want to mention quickly, if people want to get involved, donate, volunteer, how they can get more information about what you're doing and how to get involved with your campaign.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, my phone's ringing, and even though you hit do not disturb, it's still going off. So find me out on electjimcooper.com, and I'm also Elect Jim Cooper on Facebook and Twitter. I'd love to have help and support on the campaign. We're raising money. We have Kelsey and I have the not this coming Saturday, but the following 3 Saturdays after that. We're looking for a whole bunch of people to go doorbelling with us, and we just love to have your support. And the other thing is, encourage everyone on your calls to reach out to a local elected official and get to know them. They're regular people like me, and they need help. I can't influence everyone else, and having an army of people like you to help make influence is the way things get done in communities. You don't do it from the top down, you do it from the bottom up. So thanks a lot for having me, and I hope I'll have your support.
Oh, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. And for those of us in Thurston County, I think you pretty much got them locked up. And so I think it should be an interesting time, and it should be a good race. And so I'm hoping to see you guys both come through and with the progressive agendas that I think a lot of Americans, especially in Thurston County, are waiting for. And so just want to thank you again for your time, and look forward to speaking with you again in the future.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. All right. And so for those of you just that joined us recently in the 5 o'clock hour, that was Jim Cooper running for Thurston County Commissioner, District 1, and that's in Washington State. This is Project Sanity. We're on the Benjamin Dixon channel. We're also over at projectsanity.org, where you can find some of the exclusive footage that we were talking about earlier. Eric's interview with Lee Camp will be up there soon, and we did a show on 9/11, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, and caught some Jill stuff. And we're going to be working on bringing you guys more content more frequently on the channel, so make sure to subscribe if you want to be the first to find it when it goes live. Other than that, I also just wanted to mention, if one of our viewers, if you know about a Jim Cooper in your town, you got a county commissioner, you got a state office, something like that somebody's running, and you think that they have some interesting things that we could have a conversation about on our show, we could get to know more about their position, please go ahead and reach out to one of us. You see our Twitter handles down here pretty often. You can find us there. You can email us. You can check out the Google Plus community. There's a lot of ways to get a hold of us. Just reach out, let us know, even just in chat, and we'll follow up and see what we can find. So with that, I guess we'll go into some quick thoughts about Jim Cooper's interview there, and then we will jump into our deep dive talking a little bit more about 9/11.
I don't know about you. I think you did a good interview. I think that he was well spoken. He definitely gave some answers that I wasn't expecting, but I also, you know, you got to respect he's definitely on the city council, so can't speak too much about the shooting. Which I think for you and I, Richard, as men of color, especially as black men in America, we're going to be, you know, kind of worried about that because Thurston County hasn't always had the reputation of being the most friendly county to people of color in Washington State. Kind of fell along the lines of it. Once you go south of Tacoma, you know, you get outside the Lakewood area. Occasionally, you can go to JBLM, Joint Base Lewis McChord, for those of you at home. You run in north of Seattle or east of any of that, you run into areas where we're just not welcome. So it's nice to see an elected official actually speak up on behalf and say, hey, no, there's people of color in my city who are important parts of this, and they are going to help us out, and they're great leaders. That's not something you hear, you know?
Yeah, I thought it was impressive to see how he tried to engage those issues head on and didn't try to hover around them or circle around or anything like that. He really dove right in there, and so I respect him for that. And I think for those not familiar with Washington, there's a long history going all the way back to Washington becoming a state about why you would see in more rural areas, you know, not as much affection towards the communities of color. I'll leave it at that. And so I think it's tough in Thurston because I think Olympia is one type of place, and then if you go towards the outskirts of Yelm or Tenino or something like that, you're getting into very different types of communities, and it's hard for me to imagine even trying to encompass all of their perspectives in a single representative, or even or even a few. And so I think that's an interesting task, and I'm looking forward to speaking with them more about if and when they get into those positions, what it is they're actively working on and what that work looks like.
Oh yeah, I very much look forward to working very closely with both him and Kelsey, because now that I know two of them, you can bet I'm going to be a pain in the side of the county commission's office, because there's some things I'd like to see changed.
Yes, and so I look forward to seeing some of that interaction, and I think Dave's getting a clip from our 911 show that we did on September 11th, and we took a bit of a different angle on it than most. We wanted to re-look at what was going on with, I guess, what's often referred to as conspiracy stories, but I think, you know, Dave might be able to give a better intro to this than I am, and it looks like he might be ready, but we spoke with a representative from the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, and we got some really great information, and I'll let Dave expand a little bit about what we covered.
Well, you know, I got the guys on. Oh, no, I'm in the air, but you guys aren't hearing me. Okay, so yeah, Adair bailed out on our 911 show, so I'm curious to talk to him a little bit about some of the stuff that we were talking about. But yeah, we had a little show on 911, and we were fortunate to have a representative from Architects and Engineers for 911 Truth, and they are an organization of over 2,600 now architects and engineers from around the world that are part of this organization with a what do you call it, signatures, 26,000 signatures, a petition, there you go, sorry, of 26,000 or more signatures that are really wanting to have a true investigation of how the towers came down, because even the 911 Commission doesn't talk about Building 7, and a lot of the commissioners say it was just a whitewash. The official reports are full of holes and just don't match up with visual evidence and what people are seeing and what they witnessed and testimony. And there's just a lot of questions. And so we had a show on 9/11, and we had Ted Walter from 9/11 9/11 Architects and Engineers for Truth, and we were at a great conversation. They have a new project going on with the University of Alaska, where they are specifically looking at World Trade Center 7. And this is a little clip from our show, which you can find over at projectsanity.org if you want to watch the whole thing. But this is Ted talking about, I believe, I'm hoping this clip is what's coming up. If not, I'll find it. But this is Ted talking about the fires and how really what they have found is that the fires did not cause Building 7 to come down. So here's Ted Walter.
This being performed by, a professor, like one at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And so that's what we've done. And it's been quite an investment financially on the part of our organization. But we've chosen to sponsor this research by Dr. Halsey. And he actually announced today yesterday at this conference, he traveled to New York to present his preliminary findings, and based on about a year of analysis that they've been doing. And his conclusion, pretty simply, but definitively, he can say at this point that fire could not have and did not bring down this building. So that's where we're at. There's a lot more work that has to be done to shore up that finding, and as well, his focus, his approach is to go, well, let's look at everything else that could possibly have somehow affected this building. Somehow the debris falling on the ground and falling on the building, weakening it in some way. But so this study should be done by next April, at which point, we'll have a final report from him, and then he will go about trying to publish his findings in academic journals. And we are, really counting on this to make a difference and help this argument gain traction within the engineering community. And a lot of our time by next year will be devoted to making sure, doing everything that we can to ensure that it does.
So you mentioned that he basically, Dr. Halsey has made the conclusion that this did not come down by fire. And now he's basically, the rest of the study is going to be to try to find out what did bring down the building. Is that right?
Yeah. So Halsey came into this project saying, I will definitely be able to tell you what did not bring down this building. So the goal has been to primarily look at whether fire could have somehow brought down this building. I think once he has exhausted all sort of natural scenarios, and subjected the building to those natural scenarios in the computer model, I think that leaves us with only one rather obvious explanation. I'll be honest, it remains to be seen how explicitly Dr. Halsey wants to address that. But the idea is to eliminate, at a minimum, all natural scenarios.
And Mike, myself, this is where we are on Building 7, which this is, encouraging as far as what, the truth movement, if you will, looking for some real evidence as opposed to the NIST report and the complete ignoring of it in the 911 Commission. We've been watching some of the videos from Dr. Halsey when it first started. I've been looking at some of their reports, and we've been talking about Building 7 pretty much the first part of the show and the anomalies. So it's good news that there is actually an investigation progressing. What about? I know you're looking into both towers. Where are you with the Twin Towers? And because the more and more I look at it, we got to be looking at that too. So are you any further in maybe, I guess it really is going to come down to raising some money to funding a report of that size?
Yeah, money is certainly a factor. I think it's definitely on the horizon to also model the towers. It's not something that we definitely decided to do or committed to. But it's something that ideally we would like to do. We kind of wanted to take one step at a time and see how it goes with Building 7, and see what kind of work Dr. Halsey would be able to do. But I think he is interested in going forward with modeling the towers as well. Now we may see that like Building 7, his analysis of Building 7, and I mean what he also spoke about at the conference was how utterly and thoroughly, I guess you would say, inept NIST's modeling was. And really, not only, I mean, a lot of people will take the approach that NIST's report and their analysis was fraudulent. It was deliberately trying to cover up what happened and come to a different conclusion that was totally unsupported by any evidence. But even from just a basic like modeling methodology perspective, they did many things that were terribly wrong that Dr. Halsey reported on. And we think that with that kind of a like really damning assessment coming out of this study, that alone could be a big trigger for engineers in general, and hopefully the broader public to really look at this again seriously, and then make the rather logical jump to saying, okay, well, if Building 7 was a controlled demolition, what does that mean about the Twin Towers?
Indeed. What does that mean about the Twin Towers? So that was a very interesting show, Richard. You were there, and you had some questions. What's your thoughts on what Ted talked about? And I know that we were discussing the broader ramifications of, even if you go beyond what was at the what was behind it all. How has it been used beyond the crime itself to create more crimes and continued crime, whether it's in the Middle East or in other areas around the globe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think priority number one, or one of the number one things that came out of it, I think, is the erosion of our civil liberties and privacy, and a disorientation of the relationship between the authorities and our personal information. It's been completely thrown on its head, and we've seen the fallout from Snowden and others as a result. But going back to the actual show that we had, disclaimer, I came into the show thinking, okay, I hope Dave doesn't make us look too crazy.
There is always that possibility, by the way.
And so I when 9/11 initially happened, I was younger, just starting high. It was, I took it kind of for face value. I got somewhat wrapped up in the patriotism that followed. A lot of my friends got further wrapped up than I did and joined the military. Unbeknownst to them, the reason that truck drivers were getting the biggest bonuses weren't because they just really liked people who drove trucks, but because it was one of the most dangerous things that they could be doing over there. And so a lot of them suffered various injuries. Had one friend lose both legs. And so it's had real world consequences, both in my immediate circles, and I'm sure for a lot of other folks who weren't so lucky as even to get their friends or family members to come back, even if it wasn't whole. And so whether that be mentally or physically. And so the cost of going to war as a result of 9/11 and the ensuing things go on, the consequences are immense, and we'll definitely talk more about those. But I came in skeptical to the show, thinking, they gave an explanation. All the right people checked off on it, said it sounded good. So as skeptical as I may be, or as problematic as the official story is, I could take it at its face, and I just kind of let it go. Also, as no coincidence, in addition, that the association with Alex Jones and the lizard people and all that, when it gets into the Illuminati and all that stuff, it becomes a more dangerous topic to be associated with. And after that show that Dave spearheaded, I realized that that's a problem, and that there are very legitimate questions to be asked, being asked by reasonable, legitimate people who are taken aback a bit by just how ridiculous, once you dig into the story, it is. Primarily around the fire causing the vertical free fall, essentially collapse of the World Trade Center 7 building, when that has never happened before or since. And if you look at some of the videos, the Architects for 9/11 Truth website, it's ae911truth.org. There's a video on there that you can find that shows some of the other buildings that have other steel frame buildings that have been engulfed in flames and didn't collapse. And when you see the explanation of flame being used for World Trade Center 7 and the failures of the NIST modeling that he mentioned, that Ted mentioned in that clip, it becomes very problematic for me to take that on its face. And I think that these architects and engineers are the exact people that we need to spearhead an effort like this, so that it's not coming out of the Alex Jones camp, but it's coming from professionals, that this is important.
Yes.
If steel buildings can collapse like that from fire, they need to know how that
well,
happens.
Well, here's the thing. Theoretically, firefighters shouldn't go up in those buildings anymore.
Yeah, there's a lot of structural, integral, engineering, and architectural questions that apparently a large portion of their community feels are not being answered. And from what I gathered with Ted, and it's in that interview later, for those who choose to watch it, talk about that there's a fear to get associated with the other group. It's more comfortable and more palatable for a lot of folks to accept what it seems as from the mathematical and engineering standpoint an insufficient explanation. It's easier for them to grab hold of that than to be looped in or linked in with the folks that who just think that maybe this government's not giving us the whole story, but we're then looped in with the same people that think, well, it was obviously lizard people, and the metal piece that fell off of Hillary was clearly her cyborg leg falling apart. So,
well, we've talked about this. I know
those are distinct or separate
Adair's laughing.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, Adair's laughing, and I want to get him in here because I want to get the physicist perspective. And I gave you a link to watch. There's a great video, another great video, and we'll put all these links in this description too. But there's another great video that's called Blueprint for Truth, I think it is, and it really is. It's the guy Richard Gage, who created this Architects and Engineers for Truth organization. He really lays out a textbook lecture on why this isn't what they're telling us. And even, we talked about it in the interview. NIST says there was no real damage from falling debris in their official report, but there were fires caused by it. So, and so it's just, on its face, there's something wrong. 42% of America have completely blocked out the fact that Building 7 fell. I thought there was a third tower that fell. You guys didn't really remember. Adair didn't really realize that. We were talking about the same building, right, Adair? So jump on in here, Adair. Have you seen any actually of the collapse itself? And we were talking about fire and stuff. What's your take?
So to preface this, guys, for those of you watching, apparently I'm much younger because I didn't realize that Richard was in high school for this. I was in the 4th grade. I was starting the 4th grade. I was 9 years old, and I remember watching the towers fall because my mother called me. So that is the most poignant image that I have, is as a 9-year-old waking up to go to school and seeing a plane literally fly in and hit the tower, and it just seeing people fall. And it's a very traumatic event for a lot of people. Now, that being said, I do find the government story plausible. And so for my folks at home, plausibility is the fact that it could be true. I don't have the blueprints. I don't have the different numbers that are used to grade to give the certain amount of structural integrity for whatever they're using. So let's take a quick hypothetical situation. One that would not be entirely unrealistic given the fact that America has seriously failing standards as it pertains to infrastructure, which we can point to Flint, for example, about seriously failing infrastructure. Let's say that whoever designed this was a total jackass. And instead of giving, so a lot of times when you're designing a building or you're designing anything that's going to be holding weight, you want to make sure that there's enough structural support around it, that there's, in this case, enough steel beams that each beam is not holding its maximum load potential. So the maximum amount any one beam can hold before it falls over, because it just becomes too heavy. Let's say that whoever did this was terrible at their job, and they put just enough beams in to meet to cancel things out. So X sub 1 cancels out with X sub 2. The weight that it's holding cancels out with the weight that it can hold. So everything is good as long as nothing at all changes. It remains a static situation, and everything's good. If there were to be some type of fire damage, if there were to be some sort of weakening of the metal, which if you heat steel long enough, a human can take that beam that's been heated long enough and rip it in half and bend it at the point in which it's been heated. So that could cause a catastrophic failure if that were to be the case. Now, am I saying I have any actual facts? No. I don't have anything that was released. I'm simply going from the physics perspective of how math could say, yeah, this is right. Do I think there's been a conspiracy? Absolutely, there's been a conspiracy. Richard, you talked about civil liberties. The NSA was already doing what the NSA was doing before this. Like, they knew who the hijackers were. They knew where they were living. They had their phone calls, all that other stuff. George W. Bush had a dossier put in front of him. That whole 9 yards, it's already been investigated and cleared out by Congress. They've given us that bone. So I don't doubt that.
No one's been held accountable. I mean, everybody got promoted.
Of course.
They signed off on it and said, well, I know it didn't work.
So here you got, now you've apparently
you.
It's the same architect. So apparently these architects are really shitty because they designed 3 steel structures that were absolutely the crappiest buildings I've ever seen. And now I've seen another one, guys. I've seen pictures of Building 6. That's crazy too. I mean, Building 5 was fully engulfed. It didn't fall down, and something took out the core of Building 6. I don't know if it was the top of the building, but its core is gone. But the rest of the steel structure didn't collapse either. So correct. I mean, there are so many bizarre, weird things. I mean, the whole morning was bizarre and weird. But I got to tell you, there's we're going to get James Corbett on the show. The time zones are different because he's in Japan, but we're going to get him on the show if I have to interview him separately. But we're going to talk about some of this stuff. He's really done a lot of detailed investigation on this subject. Has been one of the things that he's done for years. So I want to talk to him about this. But there's just, there's never been a real investigation by the government. It was held. I mean, one of the greatest statistics that blew me away is that, every crisis we've ever had, Pearl Harbor, JFK, you name it, within a week, they've named a special commission to figure out what the hell happened. They had to drag this government to do it. It took 411 days to get the commission, which was completely, it had to because of the families, the New Jersey girls, to get it to happen. And then they put Kissinger on it. Then they underfunded it. And then, and then it was a complete whitewash. Cleveland quit. I mean, it was a joke. So we've never gotten the real story. And you're right, Richard. Here we have scientists that are hopefully we can convince our good friend Adair here that through physics, and we're going to sit down and we're going to watch that video together on a hangout and start picking it apart. But, there's just way too many things that we have completely washed under the rug. We've checked off all the lists on these guys' country lists that they wanted to take out. Iran and Syria are next, and those guys are teed up. So both parties are part of the military-industrial complex, and it doesn't matter really who becomes president. That's why I'm so glad we're worried about down ticket and even further down ticket here on a local level, because this is where shit's going to change. Those guys are going to destroy the planet one way or the other, no matter who's in office. Hopefully we can survive long enough to make some changes locally. But I think it was a great show. I think we're gonna talk more about it. Ted's gonna keep us updated. We'll get more into it when you have a little more information, Adair, and then we'll get Dr. Sutton involved as well. And the good doctor. Congratulations to our good friend Brandon Sutton on his completion of his PhD. We have quite a lineup here. We've got PhDs, we've got physicists, we've got assholes with opinions. That's me. Oh, you too. Okay. But I thought it was a great show, and we got a lot of people coming to view it. And I'm glad I didn't make you look too crazy, Richard. And
real quick, I just want to jump in because we talk about scientists, right?
Right.
When I took a law class, here's what my law professor told me. Somebody had asked, well, if I go to trial and the other side brings in an expert, how do you do that? He said, you hire your own expert. You can hire anybody to say what you want them to say. And that's one of the things that when I hear about anything, I try to take it with a grain of salt, because you can pay anybody to say anything. If a group has an agenda, there's a saying, numbers don't lie. Numbers lie all the damn time. I can make any fact or figure sound one way, and because if I have an agenda, and this works for both sides.
I think I took a class in college that was lying with statistics.
Exactly. You have the one side that says the government's absolutely true, and then you have the side that says it's total crap, and they both use the exact same numbers, right?
Mhm.
So numbers lie all the time, and just be in science, we have a saying, it's all about the consensus. It doesn't matter if there's an offshoot group that says no. If the larger number of scientists in a given field say this is what's accepted, then that's generally what's accepted, personal views aside, right? So I respect the work that they're doing. I'd be interested to read, see the actual formulas they use, watch the computer models, and do all that other fun stuff, because that's what I attend university for.
You said that you actually said to me you would consider making this your project. So
Yes.
University of Alaska wants collaboration. They want people to look at their stuff. They download all of their drawings and their models as they do them. There's reports that they do on their site. That's WTC7. Evaluation.org, and this is basically what Ted's group is paying for their first evaluation. And they basically said that regular fires did not bring this building down. There's just no way.
And don't be shy to take another look at what the official story is from the government and refresh that in your mind while you're comparing it to what these scientists and these engineers and architects are able to come up with.
I mean,
I'm skeptical of architects. You give me central engineers, that's one thing. You give me an architect, and I've had friends that did architecture. They drew pretty buildings, and then they made models of those buildings.
All right, before we devolve into a science fight.
Oh, okay. It's going to be good.
I love architecture. I love you guys.
They're the dreamers, right? And the engineers, they're the ones who are like, nah, that's not going to work.
Right. And so, by the way, if a building fails or a bridge fails, don't blame the architect. Always blame the civil engineer.
Oh, always blame
the civil engineer. The civil engineer and the construction companies, because those are the people. The engineer is supposed to tell the construction companies, you need to get stuff of this quality, of this grade, because otherwise the math doesn't work, and there's no such thing as a small mistake in physics. You move the decimal by just one space, and you've got an entirely different equation, and you're a magnet at least one order of magnitude off, and that's major, especially in civil engineering.
I think Adair brings up an interesting point that is worthy of further examination of, that there is a possibility that the part of whatever is being covered up is just a massive failure of meeting regulations or building codes and those types of things. Like, one of the things that was mentioned was that the sprinkler system was failing on some of the floors, and they blamed it on what was going on at the World Trade Center,
right?
The main two towers. But I don't know how in-depth that was actually investigated or evaluated, of whether perhaps sprinkler systems just weren't functioning, and a variety of other things. Although, again, when you look at those other videos of buildings burning, comparable buildings burning, and you look at the free fall, and you look at it, when you look at the idea that, while this may be possible, that it's never ever happened in any other point in time, but there's been plenty of fires and similar fires and even bigger fires. That's one of the things that I think just makes it very legitimate to ask questions without being labeled a Looney Tune or anything like that.
And we're not even talking about Adair. We're not even talking about the molten steel. You want to start talking about molten steel weeks later underneath the buildings? How does that happen?
I do want to try and I want to mention first, Ben's going to be coming on in just about a little under 20 minutes. And so I just wanted to mention that we'll be going to him shortly. And where he'll be gone shortly after us when we go off air. I did want to talk at least a little bit about what this has meant foreign policy-wise, civil liberty-wise for us moving forward since 9/11. Regardless of what transpired on that particular day and the questions that we may have around it, what have we seen since that? I mean, and I mentioned some of the ones that I think are big, Snowden and the civil liberties, and so. But what are some of the things that one of the things you mentioned, Dave, and I'll let you kind of give it briefly, is that they mentioned a list of the axis of evil, and at that point we had only invaded Afghanistan and were looking at Iraq. Who else was on that list, and what's happened since then?
Well, of course, the axis was the very famous line that George Bush said in his, I think it was a State of the Union speech. I don't know what year it was. I think probably 2002. He called the axis of evil Iran, Iraq, and North Korea, who just tested another underground nuclear test as well. and lobbing missiles everywhere. So he's having a tantrum. But yeah, that was the original axis of evil. But one of the issues that came up right after 9/11 and was testified to by in numerous media sources was with General Wesley Clark talking about the list of 7 countries that basically was on the chopping block after 9/11. It was literally the day after, within a couple of days of 9/11, when Wesley Clark walked into the Pentagon and asked a general, and he said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Well, we're going after Iraq." And he's like, "Iraq? What?" And then the next day he comes back and says, "Oh," he says, "Are we still doing that?" He says, "Oh yeah, it's worse. We've got Yemen, Libya, Iran, Syria, 7 countries." And I don't have them all in front of me right now, but allegedly there's Libya's gone. That was on the list. Iraq, that was on the list, of course, and I believe the last 2, or 2 of the ones that are remaining are Syria and Iran, which are being teed up by the mainstream media, by both candidates, and especially Hillary Clinton. Now, with regards to our national security, or rather our privacy, just to sort of touch on that, and I'll throw it back to you guys. But I saw Snowden last night, and I saw the live stream from him from Russia, and it was to 800 theaters, and it was pretty cool with Oliver Stone and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Great performances, by the way. I think it's a great film. I haven't seen a lot of great films lately, and it's probably I would consider it a great film. But he said some very interesting things, and they've used these laws that they've enacted after 9/11 continuously. Of course, Obama just re-upped the state of emergency. The authorization for military force has never been voted on again since 9/11. And Barbara Lee is right now the only person that voted against the war in Afghanistan and this authorization of use of force. Is trying to get another vote right now, and it's not happening. But this use of force has been used 37 times around the globe, including in Yemen and Syria. Syria is being used. The stuff we're doing in Syria, basically putting one side against the other, is all being used under the authorization of use of force. What came after 9/11. So it's unabated. Our civil liberties, they're literally looking at everybody. Snowden had 3 tips from Ed Snowden. Get a password manager that changes your passwords, behind the scenes. And use Signal to talk to people, and put a Band-Aid on your webcam because it won't fuck up the lens, but they're looking at you if they want to. So it's pretty scary what's happened since 9/11. And so whatever the reason, they've used it as an agenda.
Yeah, and what we've seen is, as you've mentioned, invasions and escalations of conflicts in several other countries. 37 uses of this authorization that was intended to respond to those that were guilty for 9/11.
Last I heard, Bin Laden's gone.
Yeah, and as bad as ISIS is, they didn't have anything to do with 9/11.
Nope. Nope. That's another thing.
They're mostly ex-Ba'ath, or they started as mostly ex-Ba'athists from the Saddam Hussein's Iraqi army.
Well, that's certainly where they got their organizational skills.
Yes, and apparently significantly large amounts of their armament that were left unguarded by the Iraqi military, all of which courtesy of us. Both the disbanding of the original Iraqi military in order to get them desperate for work, money, power, so that they formed these groups, a group like ISIS. Then we we basically left the tons of Humvees and open boneyards, I guess you might call them. Massive, literally tons and tons of weapons that we continue to drop in areas like around the Syria conflict and elsewhere, where we're intending for one group to get it, but who ends up with it? Well, the satellite's already moved on by the time somebody picks it up, so who knows who got it. And so we've perpetuated conflict. And an interesting statistic that's come out a few times, but I just recently came across it again, is that the United States has been at war for more than 90% of our existence. More than 90% of the time that the United States has existed, we've been at war. Be it internally with the Civil War, or be it other wars, French or with Canadian or Mexico, or the Vietnam War. And ironically, one of the few peace periods, there was a 1 year, I believe, I'm trying to remember the list off the top of my head, 1 year in the 70s where we basically said we weren't at war, but even that's probably a stretch. So as I recall, there were smaller conflicts arising throughout.
Illegals. Well, there was a lot of illegal stuff going on.
Yeah,
A lot of bombing, and what Obama was just there too, right? He was just in Laos. We were bombing the hell out of them illegally for a while. So yeah, I mean this.
Kissinger, who is currently being courted by Hillary Clinton, so
right,
if you're looking
part of
for
her,
some insight into what kind of foreign policy voices she's going to be listening to.
That's her long and distinguished list of war criminals that are advising her campaign. But yeah, the drone wars, I mean, just, it hasn't changed. If anything, it's escalated. There are those that say 9/11 was our first drone attack. But because it certainly escalated after that. And Obama has used it, the Intercept has if you haven't checked out the drone papers, that is something that is a must read. You have to read the drone papers to find out what the kill lists and it's just ridiculous that, habeas corpus is out the window. They removed it with the Military Commissions Act. Patriot Act has been re-upped twice. NSA is collecting everything on everybody around the world, literally everything, and this. I mean, I know Snowden. They're saying Snowden is using this as a way to get a pardon. He's just a punk. But if you look at all the whistleblowers and what Obama has done to whistleblowers in this administration, the ones that did step up, and they cover this in the movie, but the ones that did step up, the real, real guys that said something, one guy was arrested by the FBI and ripped out of his shower naked after he blew the whistle on the NSA and what's something they were doing. So there's no love for whistleblowers. Chelsea Manning, she's having, she's being persecuted. So this is where Edward Snowden would end up under the Espionage Act, which is this completely out-of-date, ridiculous law that is being used to, now is he going to pardon him? Yeah, right. The president. This is not Obama. It's not Bush. It's not going to be Hillary or Trump. It's the presidency. The executive power, the executive in this country is out of control, and the Congress ain't doing shit.
Yeah, no, and I mean it's really scary. Just imagine for a moment what Edward Snowden. I haven't seen the movie myself, but I imagine it touches on it. What he must have experienced when he first saw something that both not just looked strange, but wildly illegal and dangerous. And when you see something at your workplace, it's I imagine that would set off some bells. And I can't imagine what I would do put in that same situation. I mean, I've been at jobs where they do things that I think are questionable or whatever, and it's an uncomfortable experience. And I can only imagine when you're talking top secret information, NSA, and you just happen to see your buddy spying on his ex-girlfriend or something or whatever, you might see in the office day to day of people misusing or mishandling their information or powers, and the way that it's treated around the office as something acceptable, or so long as the wrong person doesn't see you, you're fine. And
there's a groupthink mentality that comes into play, and you feel like you're part of something bigger. There's a lot of psychological ins and outs to why people do what they do or don't report on things that are obviously wrong for some greater good. I mean, the Nazis thought they were doing the right thing. I mean, it basically is at every level you can justify, with numbers, statistics. You can justify just about anything or give a reason for something. But Ed Dare, go ahead.
This is nothing new, and that's the thing that people aren't understanding. We've done this forever. It's just becoming more and more advanced as technology gets more and more advanced. But I've pulled up a list here real quick, Richard, of wars the United States have been in. This is going in descending order from longest to shortest. Vietnam War, 19.4 years. War in Afghanistan, 15 years. Moro Rebellion, 14 years. Northwest Indian War, 10 years. Iraq War, 8.8 years. The American Revolutionary War, 8.4 years. Second Seminole War, 6.7 years. American Civil War, 4 years. World War II, 3.7 years. Korean War, 3.1. War of 1812, 2.5. War on ISIS, 2.3. Still continuing, as is the war in Afghanistan, by the way, also continuing. Mexican-American War, 1.8 years. World War I, 1.6. Great Sioux War of 1876, 1.2. Spanish American War, 0.6. Persian Gulf War, half a year. Kosovo War, 3.3 years. Not listed in this includes the the Philippine American War. It was not listed, and that is what we have right there. So those are wars that America's been in listed by how long they've been going on. But the thing about this is, folks, it's your civil liberties have been infringed upon. Now they just tried to make it a little more legal. Like that's what the Patriot Act did. Do I agree with it? No. But
what they did is they put it on the table and they said, "This is the illegal stuff we're going to do. Are you going to approve it?" And we basically signed off and said, "Okay."
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but they were going to continue to do the illegal stuff.
It was in the drawer.
Yeah, it's just presumably if they got
had
caught,
they had it in the drawer. They took it out of the drawer and they brought it. And they're like, "Oh, look, we can use this now. Come on."
I mean, I have an issue with it.
Around the same time, though, they did actually say that they had been recording, or they had been trying to track and record every electronic transmission of information since like 1980.
Right.
Yeah, and it's not that hard if you have a large enough computer system and smart enough people.
Well, here's the thing. Now that Banford, I don't know if you've ever read James Banford, but he has a long list of books that he basically busted the NSA initially with the puzzle. I think it's the Puzzle Palace. But basically, he's the one that outed the NSA as no such agency. And but his latest concerns are, and Assange, I think, and Snowden talk about this a little bit at some point, but basically that the quantum computing that they're developing right now. And they're not only getting, I mean, they're getting everything now, but they're literally going to be able to get everything once they master quantum computing. And that ain't far off.
It's really a matter of sorting and finding the information that they're looking for at this point. The collection is, because of how the nature of the networks go, simply adding a recording feature, it just takes those huge databases that we've heard about them constructing over the last few years of massive, like, zettabytes of information that they're keeping.
Well, that's, they sort of describe in the movie how they get into this rabbit hole where they're looking for a guy over here that's got banking interest in this, terrorist organization, and then he's talking to this guy over here, and then he's talking to his cousin in LA or wherever, and then next thing you know, like everything in the internet, you're 15 levels down and you're watching somebody take a shower on their webcam. It's a 15-year-old daughter of something, so that's what they do.
That's creepy, but
just a small parallel from the private industry is like I did cell phone repair for a while back before smartphones were a big thing. It was mostly still like flip phones, but phones had cameras, and I can guarantee you at most places, if you ever took your cell phone in to be repaired, and it probably still happens now, people are looking at your pictures.
Oh yeah, of course.
It doesn't matter. They have software in order, and they're wrong. They can get fired. They won't do it. But I'm telling, I can pretty much assure you it's happening.
We're a curious lot. We just remember the moment you take your photos in and get them developed. They made a movie about that. It was Robin Williams. You make copies, and we're a curious lot, human beings. We're gonna look, and if you have the power to do it, you're gonna do it. They're pissed off that he basically Snowden outed them for being able to get into Skype and YouTube and Facebook, and then Verizon was, like, here you go, you can listen to everybody. I mean, he blew their cover basically because they were able to listen to everybody through all these apps, and he said, "Oh, nope, they're all in it."
They didn't have any cover because people in information security have been saying this exact thing before Snowden came. What Snowden did was he took the classified documents and gave them to somebody. But if we'd listened to people in information security, we'd have been known, oh, hey, this stuff is happening, that there's vulnerabilities in Skype.
Same reason cops don't turn other cops in. They lose their job. You become part of the system, and you can't get out of it. The president's the same thing. He's in this security state system. You start working for the CIA, NSA, all of a sudden everything starts to look okay, and you start to fudge.
This is civilians. Like, we've got civilians in information security that for years have been saying, put tape over your webcam.
Right.
Use different, use a proxy server. Use anything that you can. I use Tor browser more often than not. But I mean, so here's the thing about the NSA and why they're able to spy on anybody with the limited resources they have, saying they could spy on anybody that's in the immediate relation to a terrorist. Facebook. We've all got Facebook. You can check just how distantly related you are to any one person in the world on Facebook. I am 3.16 people away from any other human being on Earth based on my Facebook connections. Meaning I'm 3.16 people away from a
Terrorist.
terrorist and from
You're a
President
terrorist.
Obama. Like, so
I don't think we can
because
talk
of
anymore,
that,
Darren.
I don't think but that's the thing. That's what's been going on. Now, I'm not affiliated with any terrorist organizations. No way. I'm a good American. I'm a good dude. I like to see everyone be prosperous. I want people to be healthy. I don't want to see any kind of war, conflict. F all that. Plus, I'm an atheist. They wouldn't take me. But
Yeah, we're one of the ones they're going to take out right away. Yeah.
right. So, but I mean, that's kind of what it is. Like, so for example, I'm a huge sports fan. I'm a huge sports fan. I love the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's my favorite football team.
What?
Yeah, I don't hold it against you, by the way. Go ahead.
I lived right next door to a woman who dated a backup lineman, Cody Wallace, for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they were still close friends. I lived next door to somebody he dated and was in current contact with, so I was, 2 people removed from Troy Polamalu, one of my favorite players of all time. That's how interconnected we are as people. It's a very, very, very small world, folks. And so that's why we're all being spied on. I mean, I'm not okay with it. And if we could get some encryption software that was uncrackable, I would absolutely send that to the general public. But, life is what it is, and I'm going to work hard to change the status quo. But in the meantime, folks, just take the requisite steps to protect yourself. Find out about some information security. Talk to folks on Twitter that are giving out free tutorials. You want to learn how to hack? Go to hackthisite.org and learn about hacking, learn about how it works, so you're better able to protect yourself. I do not advocate you going out there and being assholes. Got it?
Thank you for that, Darren. I appreciate that addendum. And I see that we are just about wrapping up here, so I will go ahead and I just want to say real quickly, thank you all for watching. Make sure to subscribe whether you're watching on Benjamin Dixon's channel. He'll be on shortly afterwards, after we end our broadcast. Or if you're watching over on Project Sanity, you can click over on the little eye icon over there. Whoop, about there. Click on that, and you'll get subscribed, and you'll be able to catch any of those live shows that we do and any other little additional bits that we're working on in the future. So thank you again for tuning in. I want to say thank you, Dave and Dare and Eric and Jim Cooper and everybody behind the scenes and David. And just want to, again, just thanks everyone for tuning in, sharing the interesting clips that you guys find on our channel, and helping us build some subscribers and get out there so that more people are able to join in on the conversation, and we can help try and bring some sanity into our political conversation. And with that, good night, and as this would say, good luck.